Yes, it's recording. Well, hi, Clayton. I'm glad I got to finally have the time with you. It's been it's been a lot going on in your life,
You
more
know,
than
it's
one.
it's been an interesting year for everyone, but the rootverse continues to expand faster than the universe. So
Wow,
it's good times.
that is a great time. So yeah, I'm excited to have your time right now, and I guess sky has a limit. I mean, we can uncover and go anywhere. But one of the topic that I'm intrigued about, because Root Brand is all about helping human being at the root cause level.
Yep.
And just like Dr. Christina Rahm book is all about cure the causes, which is also all about let's go to the let's go to actually the root of the problem and solve it so that way we can solve more than one problems.
Yeah. Well, and it's really addressing what the real issue is, right? And understanding that if you get to the etiology, and if you understand that the etiology of pretty much every issue that we face from a health standpoint, right,
Yes.
has the same beginning. Much like life, if we traced it back properly, is going to have the same beginning, whether you look at the Big Bang or whatnot. But when you look at what we know about our health and health issues, and this is not something that's new, because when I began this journey about 18 years ago and started to dive into the research, because I grew up kind of the same way everyone else is when they begin their health journey, is looking at the importance of supplementation and diet and lifestyle, because that's what people think is important, or that's what we're told. And that's actually the exact opposite of the equation to create health and prosperity and greatness. The real equation is actually addition by subtraction. So if you're loaded with chemicals, pollutants, heavy metals, different environmental toxins, viral fragments, mold, fungus, parasites, is it more important to put things in, or is it more important to eliminate and remove those things to allow your body to come into balance? And the data shows that the removal is most important. In 1976, the World Health Organization published a paper that outlined how mercury and other heavy metals, but primarily mercury, was the primary cause of the majority of chronic degenerative diseases. And since that time in 1976, and what was interesting is I was born in 1977, so basically my entire life, we've known and understood that heavy metals are the primary cause, the etiology of this entire campaign. And the same groups that people look at as being part of the problem know the same information, but what they did is they set that aside to know that if you're loaded with mercury, and mercury exacerbates other toxic heavy metals, it makes them worse. It makes an environment that is conducive for the explosion of fungus, and with having extra fungus, it becomes a breeding ground for parasites. So you have this cascade that takes place, and the proliferation of all of those issues is what creates dysbiosis and an unhealthy environment, which will lead to different symptoms in different people, which a doctor is going to be able to look at and give you a diagnosis based on the group of symptoms that you're showing, and based on the diagnosis that they're trained to give you in their educational process. They're going to prescribe accordingly based on that prescription, which is not designed to get you better. It's not designed to get you well. And I don't like the term wellness, even though it's in our name. And it's what people talk about heavily, because we really work to achieve greatness. Wellness is just above, needing care from the establishment, right? The healthcare industry. So you can go down that cascade and say, oh, well, we need to add stuff. And it brings up the question is, if you're looking to add things into your lifestyle, if you're like, oh, you need to supplement with this or this or this, and you don't take care of the underlying problem. So you're adding, probiotics, or you're adding, different supplements. Do you know that you're not adding fuel to the fire if you don't ever put the fire out? And what we have found, because of, my history and then the history of Dr. Rahm and what she knows, and she's a whole heck of a lot smarter than I am, that if you cure the cause, as you mentioned, right? If you take care of the underlying problem and then you feed the body what it needs to create homeostasis, you don't have health problems. They won't exist. They can't exist because a healthy system doesn't have health problems. Or if you want to look at it from a computer standpoint, a defragged computer isn't going to have a virus, right? And a healthy functioning operating system is going to run better than is something that is overwhelmed and overburdened.
Exactly.
So,
And I think you hit the nail with the word overwhelm, is that if you're overwhelmed and if somebody's giving you more stuff, even if it's good stuff, the fact is you're overwhelmed. So if it's your overwhelmed condition, the good stuff can become more overwhelming rather than truly helping you with the problem that you have to begin with. So
it's a lot like, having a fire, right? You've got a fire burning in your system. You can look at that as inflammation and everything else.
Right.
So you've got this house fire that's going on. And if you're not doing things to squash that fire, right? If you're not putting the fire out, if you're not bringing in the fire department, with water and other fire retardants to put the fire out, and you're like, well, you know what? This wall burnt down in the kitchen, and because there was a fire and the fire is still burning, if you bring in a bunch of wood and a bunch of building materials into a fire, you're going to go, well, that wasn't a good idea because it caught on fire too. But I was trying to rebuild the wall.
Exactly.
And you're going to create more chaos, and you're going to fuel, in many instances, you're going to fuel the fire. And the other interesting aspect of, if you look at the supplement market in the United States, and I was talking to some people about this earlier today, as it pertains to legislation and compliance in the United States versus other countries, because with Root, we're fully compliant and approved in Germany and throughout the EU and in Canada and in the UK and in Australia and in parts of Africa. And we're finishing registrations in Japan so we can go into Japan. But what's interesting is in the United States, it's pretty much still the Wild West. Is you could put dog poop in a capsule and sell it as a probiotic. And as long as you didn't kill anybody, you'd get away with it for a while, because there really is no legislation and no registration process for identifying what's quality. And while someone might be selling vitamin C, right, because vitamin C is known to be very beneficial for all of the benefits that vitamin C has, what most consumers don't understand is that the majority of vitamin C in the market is actually loaded with heavy metals because the sources and the quality is horrible.
Wow.
So there is a huge difference between doing something of quality and doing something for money. And most companies are doing it for the money. They're not focused on quality. But we know that quality will always win out over time, because consumers will always eventually look for the highest quality. And when the prices are competitive, right, because some people equate quality to price, that the highest quality is going to be the most expensive. That's not always true. Yeah. So if you look at it from a value proposition from a company's perspective, and you go, look, we're going to provide the highest quality, but we're going to be price competitive. That way, if you're playing on the same playing field financially, whoever's got the best stuff is going to win.
Right. Right. And I actually agree with you. I was just talking to C60 because my friend Patty Greer, who actually introduced me to Sasha Stone, by the way. So she sells the ESS C60, which is which is not harmful for human being. But when you type C60 on google.com, the first thing comes up that it is harmful for a human being. So when I was talking to the scientist who does the work for Patty Greer, he actually told me exactly the same thing you just did, is that in the supplemental industry, like FDA does not really get involved in it because they just let it be. So it's completely up to the consumers that whether they're really availing healthy products that are helping them or whether it's not helping them. That's the choice you have to make on your own.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at other products like Carbon 60 and such, that you have a mechanism that is of benefit, but when you look at the process it takes to make it and how it has to be formulated compared to alternatives, it's good, but it's still not ideal. It's not the best in the market, and it can be beneficial when used with other components. And I think that's an important part from a consumer's perspective of working on the education, right?
Mhm.
Or as a company, and I know they do a really good job of, working on the educational aspect, that you're putting a major focus in your consumer, because that, as a company, is your biggest asset. You should invest in your community. You should invest in your customers. You should invest in your products to have their highest quality, but you should invest in your customers, because if you invest in them, they're going to create more value for you. And
Exactly. And then the proof is in
key.
the pudding, ultimately, with the supplement,
Exactly.
right? I mean, like, that's the best way to gauge whether you're going in the right direction or not, because it's people healing, it's people feeling like they want more, it's people are saying, oh my God, I can't believe I feel younger, or I can't believe that I feel more energetic. All of those things are a gauge for you, right? To create that. So I wanted to talk to you about like aging. Aging generally is caused by two things. One is the oxidation, and the other one is the inflammation. And of course, mitochondria, right, which is the one that is the key for us to make energy in our body. And that, of course, has the byproduct, which causes the oxidation, which is why we need antioxidant to compensate for that byproduct. So I guess I wanted you to cover from that perspective, that how does root help with both of those aspects of aging, which ultimately helps you be more than just a well person, but more like a thriving person?
Well, you hit on actually 3 points, and the last one you hit on is actually the key point to longevity. But when you look at oxidative stress and you look at inflammation, we know that the primary cause of negative inflammation happens to be the heavy metals and environmental toxins, and it's the cascade that takes place from those. And it's important to understand that there's good inflammation, but and then there's bad inflammation. So you want to keep the bad inflammation down. One of the best ways to measure that is C-reactive protein, which is cakewalk for blood work and such. And oxidative stress is going to come from, every aspect of life. Breathing creates oxidation, exercise, and the environment creates oxidative stress. So your lifestyle is a big part. So the key component to those two is cleaning up the operating system and providing the foundational pieces for the body's function. But that's really simple. I mean, we've got the Trinity, with clean slate, zero in, restore, natural barrier support, give me back my youth, which is massive in the anti-aging aspect, which we'll touch on a little bit. And then really the last one being mitochondrial support. And like you mentioned, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of every cell, and it is the crucial component for your immune system. It's the crucial component for maintaining just, vitality and great function. But then you have to look at what powers the mitochondria, and that's a little compound called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD, or as you might be familiar, NAD. And it's becoming a major conversation piece because of science understanding that NAD is the molecule, basically, that is a simple measurement to give you an idea of longevity. The more NAD a cell has, the longer it's going to live. Or, since every living organism has NAD in it, because it is the fuel source to power the mitochondria, if your body, your immune system, is being exposed to, say, a virus or fungus or a parasite, and your NAD levels are here, and the NAD levels of whatever you're being exposed to are higher, it is going to win, right? Because it has more energy and more power than you have. So the community, and it's really been over the last few years that it's really come about, because the NAD IVs were first used a few years ago to treat addiction. And then the studies started to show that there are a lot of benefits towards longevity, because of feeding your mitochondria more energy means, better life, because you're producing more energy and you have more energy and you're more vibrant, you can perform.
Right.
But what science has shown, and I learn a lot from my wife because she speed reads and she has an eidetic memory, and she can process information faster than the both of us combined. And what the research shows is while many people are doing IVs for NAD, which range from about $200 to $500, depending upon how much of a push you're doing, which is really expensive. And there's some complications of doing an IV because it can be really hard on your heart, and it can give you short-term benefits, but it's not long-lasting, right? Because you're pushing so much in, your body's able to use a little bit of it, and it's going to flush out what it can't use quickly.
Right.
And what research shows is that microdosing NAD, along with the proper precursors, can allow the body to create, a peak plasma level and creating a better steady state of consistency to where it's going to start producing more NAD naturally, which is going to allow your body to start functioning better. And doing that, along with removing the metals and other environmental toxins and creating homeostasis, will actually turn back the clock. Now, chronologically, we can't change the time that we're here, but biologically, your biological age can shift. You can get older depending upon how you treat your body, but you can also get a lot younger. Higher levels of NAD means biologically younger if you're removing the metals that are causing the inflammation, that are causing a lot of the inflammatory stress, that are causing the oxidative stress. So you remove those, you improve your brain, your heart, your gut, your vagus nerve connection of all of it. You get everything firing better. You boost your NAD levels, and well, you can be 70 and feel like you're 30. We have a lot of those people. It's actually kind of amazing. And we've got 2 years of history of watching people change on video. So you look at the basics, right? When you talk to people and they go, oh yeah, the cause of disease is inflammation. I'm like, no, that's like talking to a kindergartner and going, well, I'm going to go talk to a PhD and see if I'm going to have the same conversation with the PhD that I'm going to have with the kindergartner. You're not, because the PhD has a lot more history of data, a lot more history of research, and a lot more experience to go, actually, inflammation is not the cause of the problem. Because if inflammation were the cause of the problem, and you were to believe that, you have to ask yourself only one question to figure out that you're not done yet. And the question is this: if inflammation is the cause of disease, what causes the inflammation?
Right.
And if you say inflammation is just there, you have a lot of work to do. You have to understand what's causing the inflammation. And when you figure out, and this is not just one thing, right? It is a multitude of factors that is causing the negative inflammation. When you get into that aspect and you start to understand that, look, these things cause negative inflammation, these things cause negative inflammation, all of these different components. And then you start playing with bioscience engineering of understanding how complex this operating system is. And you say, okay, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. It's much like they were doing with research with mRNA when Bristol Myers Squibb was doing HIV research with mRNA vaccines. Because the theory of mRNA makes sense. The application of mRNA creates chaos. And so you have to go from theory to application. And when you do that, you see that, oh, well, this maybe isn't the key point. It's a much bigger conversation than that.
It's because you have to cover all your causes with your effects, right? And when you don't do a good job with that, then you create more causes with the causes that you're trying to sort it out, like the example that you just gave with the mRNA. Now with the inflammation, so you're right, inflammation is one of the things which can be caused by so many things. And we're not just physical, we are mental, we're emotional, we're spiritual, right? So all of these things can create a challenge in your body, ultimately, because that's where rubber meets the road. So even though there's maybe one or two ways to gauge the inflammation, but there are many, many reasons to have the inflammation in the first place, right? So that's where it becomes like a root cause corrective action analysis. Like, how do you do that to figure out what is at the bottom of it? But what you just said earlier is that at the end of the day, if you can work on the NAD/NAD, right? Like if you can work on enhancing the NAD/NAD, then you are kind of targeting the causes without having to know the causes.
Correct. And I think it goes hand in hand, right? Because you can't effectively start to boost NAD levels without addressing the underlying heavy metal environmental toxin exposure. Because if you look at some of the preliminary research that was done on telomeres, right? I remember when TA65 was introduced, which is an astragalus extract, right? And it's the one compound that's actually been scientifically proven to lengthen telomeres, right? So telomeres are the little protective caps on the end of your chromosomes, right? And that length of those protective caps is going to show you the marker for the longevity of those chromosomes in your genes. There's a little flaw in that, right? Because it's environmental exposure that causes the early degradation of those telomeres. So you could take something to enhance the telomere length, but if you're taking something to lengthen the telomeres and you still have the environment that's attacking those telomeres, you're like, I'm putting something in, but it's getting knocked down. I'm putting something in and it's getting knocked down.
Defeating the purpose. And I need to share this with you because it's very important since we're talking about telomere. So they had done the twin study, right? Astronaut twin study, Mark and Scott Kelly, right? So the interesting thing about that was because they had a twin sister on the Earth, and then they had one, brother, and one brother was on International Space Station, right? And he was there for 1 year. And when he came back, now the interesting thing is they found out that when he came back, he actually his telomere size were bigger than the twin one. But the thing that was interesting was that when he came back on Earth, and that's where your environmental thing comes in, so he was basically reverse aging from that perspective, just if you look at the size of the telomere. But within 48 hours, it reverted back to its original place that he had left with. He was still 1 year younger than his brother, right, comparatively, but the environmental effect caused him to revert back to what it was when he left the Earth. So yes, you're absolutely right on that. And we have to account for that, of course, because, we are living on this particular environment. So if you do something that doesn't really serve it, then why bother?
Correct. It's like, why spend the money on something that the talk, right? Or even the science, because you could have something that scientifically is extremely well validated to do things that would benefit you. But if you haven't done the things to lay the right foundation, right? And you can think of it like building a home. You don't get a piece of land and go out and get a bunch of wood and stick it in the ground and build a structure, because it'll fall over. Because if you don't level the land properly, do the right terraforming, lay the right foundation, and then upon that foundation, you start putting the wood in.
Exactly.
You're never going to have a lasting structure. And it's that same component. And it's where a lot of people, in our world today, because there's so much money in marketing, right? And there are so many people that are trying to sell their approach. And you can look at this in diets, right? To where there's 300 different diets, and a lot of them just recirculate. They just change the name of them. What used to be the Atkins diet is now the paleo diet. And you go,
yes. And and then the diet has like a consequences, because that is the thing that you want to maintain your electrolytes and minerals at all times in your body, because we're electrical being. And some of these diets, they take away from some of the things that you would be taking it otherwise through whatever apple or whatever you were eating before. So when you start focusing on the diet without realizing that there are cause with effect again, that to me is where the intuition comes in. Like, I've never followed a single diet because I cannot, because that to me is a punishment. Like, I don't even like the word diet by itself, because to me, it's like you're depriving yourself from something. And as soon as you deprive, then it has that energy about it, right? That it just doesn't make you feel good. And then you don't want to stay on that pathway. To me, it should be a lifestyle of eating that you want to eat in a way so that you still have a tiramisu every now and then, but you do it with however balance you want to create in your life. So that is much better approach, because it can be long lasting than not. So
well, it's if you look at how we started, right? That if you go back to cave dwellings, I don't think I've ever seen a cave dwelling that has a drawing of a vegan, right? Everybody's got spears and arrows and they're eating animals, and you're like, wait a minute, where's the people that were vegan? Oh, they didn't make it, right? And throughout history, it's a lot of times it's feast and famine, you're right, which the philosophy of intermittent fasting is a good thing, but you have to figure out how your body functions. So you have to look at your blood type, right?
Exactly.
Which type of blood do you have? Because your blood type is going to give you some markers of where you come from and how your body, functions. Like if you're an O, I'm an O. We're the athlete. We have the strongest immune system. We're hunters, and we need meat, fat, and some veggies and some pineapple, and I'm good to go, right? To where if you're an A, you say, you know what, you don't need chicken. You can actually be vegetarian. You eat some fish, you get a couple of things, and you're good to go. And if you're an A, B, you're good. If you're a B, you're going to say, okay, I need these things. And you love reading because of their personality type that goes along with it, because they're the learners, and, their diet can be a little bit different. And then you start getting into recessive traits, of looking at what your blood type is. And then you look at your mother and your father and say, okay, this one was this one was this. So while these things are good, there might be some things within that diet that don't fit me. And you test these things. But the other thing is when you look at your diet, you also should challenge yourself. So you shouldn't eat the same thing consistently every day, because we're not made for that. And if you know that French fries are bad for you, like nightshades, potatoes and such are terrible for O's, and you know that if you do that, you're going to get bloated, right? Because of how they affect you. Like me, if I ate French fries, my stomach goes, broop. But if you know French fries, when cooked properly with a lot of salt, taste really good, every once in a while, you should have some French fries. Because you know what? You're only going to be here in this skin suit once, so enjoy it.
Right. And also, there's something about this enjoyment itself, because when you're eating a food and you're truly enjoying it, you're truly loving the taste, even if it's tiramisu that may not be 100% good for your health. But at the end of the day, I think that the intention counts as much as what you're eating counts, right? So it's a combination of all that aspect that affects how it gets digested in your body. Because if you're going to be eating a food and you're going to be feeling guilty about it, or you're going to be feeling it's not good, then it has its own effects. I mean, the very fact that people, pray on the food and put an intention on the food, or even water or drinks, it changes, it transforms itself. Just like with water experiment that Dr. Emoto did, right? Just by saying good things to the water molecules were looking all beautifully following the sacred geometry. You see? So those are all the things that makes a difference on how you,
exactly.
Affect. Right, exactly. I wanted to go back to the microdosing and NAD you mentioned. So I'm assuming, but rather than me assuming, I'd like you to answer me the question, is that aspect of microdosing is embedded in every single product of root? Is that what you're saying?
When we look at the philosophy, it's incorporated in almost everything, that if you have really high quality and you understand that we are energetic beings, right? And we're quantum, this better than most, that if we are energy and we're assimilating energy and we're assimilating frequency, you don't need quantity, you need quality. And you need the right combinations of the right quality to get the right outcomes. And that's what's really unique, is getting into the bioscience engineering aspect of having a nanotechnology bioscience engineer that comes from biotech, that comes from the highest levels of medical science and clinical science in pharma and biotech, right? That went back to Harvard to study nanotechnology and bioscience engineering to really get into what the best things are right now, and understand different mechanisms. Like when you look at Restore, which is a combination of curcumin and black cumin seed and D-ribose and resveratrol, and you have some of nature's most powerful compounds. But when you combine them specifically, you're going to create nano-emulsions. You're going to, in the mixture itself, actually create some chemical processes that improve the function of all of them. And you don't need them in mass if you do it properly. And the same thing with Zero In. When you look at what Zero In is you have a combination of 5 actives and 2 catalysts. But amongst the 5 actives, you have tyrosine, theanine, mecunopyrians, pine bark, and pure curcuminoids. Well, the mecunopyrians and the pine bark are actually known to be psychedelics if taken in high quantities.
Oh,
So if you take 1, 2, or 3 capsules of zero in, your dopamine and serotonin levels are amazing. If you take 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 at once, which I've only had a couple people do, the feedback I got is like being on a 15-hour MDMA trip.
wow.
So the power of biochemistry and the power of nature is a lot more powerful than the synthetics. But there are different pathways, and doing it endogenously, right? So instead of trying to overpower your operating system and saying, okay, I'm going to push this, like you see with DMT, right? And they're trying to push the envelope. That if you give the body the tools to produce it, and then you learn that with and through your intention, you're able to do these things, you get amazing outcomes.
Yep.
And
So that is the combination right there, is that, like, she uses everything that she has learned and it combines it with the natural ingredients like turmeric and curcumin and all these ingredients that already has these great qualities, and combines it in a way that gives it in a microdosing form so that we can truly absorb it and enhance ourselves without having to feel overwhelmed within our body because of the way our body chemistry is. And that you have to understand all the composition to do something where it enhances ultimately through microdosing.
yep, you got it.
Okay, that's
I got to be terrible. I got to cut this off short because I just forgot I had a 4:30 interview that I'm late for, and I was covering for Christina. So can we continue this later, or you?
Yes, we will continue it. And also,
but we got the start.
Yes, I know this is a great start. I enjoyed it. I'm actually going to stop the recording. I have a very quick question to ask.